As you already know, today we are gonna speak about what the developer needs to know about UX design. During the presentation, we are first gonna give you a short intro about who we are. Then we are gonna discuss what is UX design and why it matters. We are then going to dive deeper into design process and deliverables, discuss a bit more about developers' role in the process, and then lastly, how to apply this to your own work. So my name is Salla. I work currently as a design lead at Ericsson, but I originally actually studied something very different. So I have my background in material science and engineering, and I worked in that field for quite a few years. Well, 2 or 3 actually, anyway. And after that, I started to think that maybe I could put my interests and my skills into better use at somewhere else. What drove me to UX design was a combination of multiple things. So as a teenager, I used to build websites, design websites for my sim game stable. And I already knew that that is something that I would really like to do. But also, maybe because I have been a scout for many, many years, I have been very interested about people and how people behave, especially when we are working in a team and so forth. So what is affecting the decisions people are making and so forth. And I have always been interested about visual arts and design. So I thought that's maybe a good combination of things for a designer. And as it usually is, I also happen to meet many really nice people who helped me along to get to where I am as of today. Now, I have been working at Ericsson for already 4 years. I started as an intern, did my master's thesis, then after that stayed and worked a few years as a product area specific designer, and then recently started as a design lead in this same team that I have been working in. How about you, Nita?
Yeah, so I'm Nita. I'm a product designer at Ericsson. I actually work in Salla's team. Just like Salla, I started as an intern, and then after my internship, I stayed in the team as a product designer. But actually before going to UX design, I was working in the media industry. So originally, I have a degree in film and TV production. But then I was working in the industry, and at some point I realized that it's not really for me, but I didn't know what I could do instead. So I ended up going to the United States. I stayed there for 2 years. I was working as an au pair. And then the second year I actually spent in San Francisco. And in there, I got to know the tech industry. I had some great mentorship, and that's how I found UX design. And then I fell in love with UX design. So after coming back to Finland, I went to Tampere University to study a degree in human technology interaction. And that's how I eventually ended up at Ericsson.
So, what is UX design? On high level, user experience design is a process that you use by design teams or design individuals to create an experience which a user would then go through when using a product or a service. The primary goal of UX design is to answer to the needs of a customer. This starts, of course, from knowing our users, understanding their needs and their pain points. But UX design covers all aspects of users' perceived experience, including usefulness, usability, and brand perceptions. This is not everything that UX design covers, but few examples. So when we talk about UX design, we are not only talking about usability as such, or we are not talking only about creating nice visuals for a website, but we are talking about the entire process the UX user has with the product or service. So why UX design matters? I think this depends on the context we are working in and from whose angle are we looking at it. For example, we in our organization, we build professional software which is sold to companies, not directly to the users. which is affecting that our user is not necessarily obviously the customer, and it's we need to take into account two different stakeholders when considering things. For us, why UX design is important might be different from organizations who are building consumer products. After all, we are all humans, but still our needs might be very different based on what we are working with, what we are needing to finish, what tasks do we have, and what needs do we have. For an example, for us as an organization, it is important to solve the right problems. So we want to focus on what brings value for our customer, for our users. We don't want to do just whatever we can. We want to finish the limited development efforts into the thing that is doing the trick, bringing most value for the customer. We also want to solve the problems in the right way. So iteration is a cornerstone of development and design. But with UX design, we want to get into the problems. We want to see the weaknesses of the solution early on so that we could actually get it right at the first time and not to iterate until on the 10th time we maybe get it right. And of course, customer satisfaction is important to us. And in our environment, happy user often means happy customer. It doesn't always go the other way around, because our users don't necessarily get to choose which tools they are using. But if they are happy, usually the people making decisions are happy. Then for our customers, UX design matters because they can get better learnability, so they need to use less time for training their employees to use the software. They get improved fit to task, so a user needs to spend less time on finishing the task that they started when they get information they need, options they need in the correct place during the process, so they can take care of their task more effectively. And that brings us to the increased productivity. So we allow them to focus on their task instead of using our product.
Okay, so then now you know what UX design is and why it matters. But then you might wonder, what do we actually do and why do we do it? You might have heard of different design processes or models, maybe design thinking or the double diamond model or whatever you have heard of. This, what you see right here, is one example of design thinking. And this is now something we use at Ericsson. So why do we then use this process? So we as UX designers, we want to understand the users. We want to understand their problems, their pain points, their needs. We also want to understand the context and the problems that we are solving. So that's why we have this discovery phase where we are trying to focus on those points. Then we also want to create solutions that, like Salla said, that we are solving the right problems the right way. And then we also, part of our job is to share all this information with others. So we want to share this information with, for example, developers or any other stakeholders we might have. And that way we create a common understanding of what are we actually doing. So you see this model or this process here, but what do we then actually do? So, for example, we do user research. Like I said, we want to understand the users. We want to understand the context, the problem. So that's what we usually do in the beginning. And then later on, maybe we have already shipped something, we have delivered something. We want to know how the product is performing. How can we improve that? After the research, we then design solutions. So we want to generate different ideas, for example, through brainstorming or any other ideation methods. And then we want to validate and test those ideas with users. And then we keep iterating and refining those solutions. Then that brings us to the next point. So we conduct a lot of testing. So like I said, we might do some validation early on. So we want to know that are we actually solving the right problems? Are we solving them the right way? And then later on, once we have iterated more, we have more refined solutions, then we want to actually test them with users, test the usability, maybe find some usability issues there. And also we might do some comparison like A/B testing, for example, between different solutions so we know which one is the most effective. Then all of this, through the whole process, we want to share knowledge with others. So for example, developers, the management, any other stakeholders, maybe you have external customers or whatever have you, so we share the knowledge. For example, we have done the user research. What did we find there? And then later on, when we are designing different solutions, why did we make certain design decisions? And then later on, when we conduct the usability testing, what were the findings there? What did we change based on the results? And so on. So basically, throughout the whole process, we are constantly communicating and collaborating with other people. That might be ranging from developers to POs. Maybe if you have a bigger UX team, you might have dedicated researchers, you might have UX writers, or different kind of roles in the process. So we all work together to create the solution. So, but what is the actual outcome? We are doing the research, for example. So what is the outcome, the deliverable that we are then making? The design process is not linear, like you see here. We go back and forth, we iterate and so on. But at different stages, we might have slightly different deliverables. So for example, earlier in the process, we want to understand the user, their needs, what kind of journeys do they go through, what kind of processes they go through. So we might make something like personas or empathy maps or user journeys. And later on, we might then refine those, make user flows or task flows, for example. Then when we start ideating different solutions, we might use something like sketches, wireframes, happy paths. We might make prototypes out of those so that we can then validate those and test them with the users. We also might create this kind of information architecture, like how is the content structured then in the final product. Then at the later stages, then we might make some high fidelity designs, interactive prototypes, kind of to show what does it look like? What does the final product look like? How does it behave? What are the interactions there? And then we even might then write some design specifications, or after conducting testing, we might write some usability test reports. And all of these are then available to you as a developer. So all of these are tools that we can have the discussion, the communication, so that you as a developer also understand what the users are like. Why are we solving these problems this way?
So where does a developer then fit in the process? Like you basically mentioned, in any part of the design process. There is maybe still a few points that you might want to consider. First of all, being active. Asking questions, what you didn't understand about the design. Is there anything that you are hesitant about in the design? Or is there something you would still need to know to be able to implement the design? Generally, I think it's super good to share ideas and, of course, give feedback and comment on the designs. Secondly, bringing in your expertise. Checking the technical feasibility. Is it possible to implement this suggested solution in the first place? How much effort might it take to implement it? You could also always propose alternative solutions, especially if something is difficult to implement as proposed. After all, we want to find out the best possible solution for the thing that we are doing, not just to go with the designer's vision. In actual product development, we always need to consider if something is worth building it. So does it bring really value for the user to justify using time on developing the item that we are planning? And I think it's very valuable to get a very balanced understanding of how long it's going to take, what effort is it going to take for us to develop it. Then thirdly, you could always try to step into the user's shoes. This doesn't necessarily mean this kind of if I was a user narrative, but everyone in the design team should be aware of what brings value for the user, and we should always take into account in all phases of the product development what this value is, what are the user's needs, and are we tackling those in the manner we need to do. And of course, in the end, this is all about teamwork. So when we are working at a team, we are able to have multiple brains on a problem. In diverse team, of course, we can take into account different angles. We hopefully are able to identify problems earlier. We are able to spot weaknesses, but also focus on potential solutions to those problems. And in the end, the responsibility is of the designer, but the developer can bring a lot of value to the process.
Yes, for sure. Then how can you apply this to your own work? What we have now been talking about here is kind of in the context if you have designers in your team or in your organization. But sometimes it can be so that maybe there are no designers. Maybe you have to make the decisions that usually belong to the designer. Or maybe you are working on a hobby project or something that you don't have the specific designers to work with you. So firstly, you can still apply the same process. You can think of the whole design thinking process. So before jumping to a solution, you can stop and think, okay, who is the user? What are their needs? What do I want to do with this? What does the user want? What do they need? Then also, what is the context that you are doing this in? So you need to do the research still. For example, if you are developing maybe an internal tool, so you have access to your colleagues, to your peers, who might be the end users actually of that experience or product. So you can then do the research with them. Then once you have done something, you can validate the ideas, you can test the solutions and so on with those same people. And most importantly, always iterate on different solutions. Then secondly, think of the user. So whatever you are doing, there will always be the user. You have to think from the user's perspective, but here's an important point. Also remember that you are not the user. Even if you are actually using the product, remember that it's not a very good argument that I would do it this way. Because people are different, people behave differently, they think differently, and that is the whole point why we do research and testing. So we validate those ideas, our own assumptions. Then thirdly, educate yourself. There is so much knowledge, so much information online, for example. So if you are now thinking maybe there was something in the presentation that you would like to then know more about, you can go online. You can learn more about those, for example, the user-centered design or usability or accessibility is, of course, also a very important topic. And kind of to summarize all of this, so you can actually apply all of this to any situation, basically. So I'm going to give you an example. If you are applying for a job, you might need to fill in an application. You need to send in probably your CV and also your portfolio. So you can either just find some old ones and send them in, hope for the best, or you can actually stop and think, who is the user? Who's going to read all of these? Who's going to read my application? Who's going to check out my portfolio? And then what do you also want to say with your portfolio, for example, or the projects you have in your portfolio? You might apply to different places. What is that specific place most interested in? How do you make sure that the person who's reading your application, it might be the recruiter, manager, maybe some future colleagues, what do they want to know? And how do you provide that information for them? So maybe they have 2 minutes to read your application. you can think of different ideas. Maybe you list them in your application, the relevant projects in your portfolio. Maybe you want to create a specific landing page where they land and you list the projects there. And then, of course, you can test all of this with your family, with your friends, with your colleagues, or once you apply for different positions, ask for feedback. Maybe you didn't get the first position, but ask for feedback. What could I do better? What could I do in the application or portfolio? And then eventually you send the iterated version, the improved version in, and hopefully you land your dream role in your dream company. So that was all from us. So thanks a lot for listening.
Thanks a lot. I hope you have been enjoying today.